Chapter 12, Specimen Handling, Transportation, and Processing. Um, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to speak about in this chapter, um, I demonstrated it in a lab once before. The one when I was talking about disposing of the biohazard, a lot of the same things will apply. Um, if you don't know what video I'm talking about, maybe you didn't watch it. It is posted on Edmodo. Feel free to go look that up. Um, it's there at your discretion. All right, chapter learning objectives. Upon completion of this chapter, you will be able to describe at least 3 sources of pre-examination error that can occur during blood specimen handling. Describe at least 3 sources of pre-examination error that can occur during blood specimen transportation. Describe at least 3 sources of pre-examination error that can occur during specimen processing or storage. Name 3 methods commonly used to transport specimens. Specimen handling after the venipuncture. Remember phases in the laboratory cycle. Pre-examination, pre-analytical phase of initial test request, specimen collection, examination, and analytical phase, final reporting of results. Turnaround time, TAT. Again, I've spoke to you all in previous chapters about making sure that you learn these abbreviations. At the end of the phlebotomy exam, once we finish up phlebotomy, you guys will have um, an exam on these abbreviations. So I strongly encourage you all to go ahead and start, if you haven't started already, familiarizing yourself with these abbreviations. Um, Time it takes for a blood specimen to be ordered, collected, transported, processed, analyzed, and have results reported. Pre-examination variables. Identify age, gender, pregnancy, medication, fasting versus non-fasting, diurnal variations, refusal to cooperate, patient unavailable, stress, anxiety, or etc. Transportation and handling variables. Correct filling, mixing, tube leakage, breakage, shaking, etc. All right. Again, all these things will have a profound effect on the test results as stated in previous chapters. So that's why it's imperative that you all follow the steps when it comes to performing venipuncture, asking, making sure that the patient has fasted if they had to fast, reviewing that making sure that you know what patient that you're dealing with. Does this patient have a issue with stress and anxiety? Um, Make sure that you invert the tubes upon collection of the venipuncture. All right. Specimen processing and storage variables, centrifugation, simple registration and distribution process delays, contamination of specimens, exposure to heat, light, etc. Specimen variables, hemolysis, blood volume and tube mixing of anticoagulants. Specimen handling after the venipuncture. Mix the specimen gentle inversions, even distribution of additive avoids clots, incomplete clotting, or hemolysis. Label the specimen correctly. Require information: name, ID number, date, time of collection, name, initials of person collecting. Label tubes immediately after blood collection. Place label in correct orientation. That means simply placing a label on the tube so that it can be read properly. You've all have worked with the tubes long enough to know that there's a sticker on the tube. However, it does not wrap all the way around the tube. There's a slight opening on the side, like a space between the top of the sticker and bottom of the sticker. Again, that's to visually inspect the amount of um, specimen in the container. So you don't want to have your label placed over there where you can't physically see that there's enough in the tube or container. Right here, this goes to what I was just talking about. Again, you want to make sure that it's placed on properly, smooth. You don't want it to be balled up, wrinkled, smeared, or anything of that nature. See here, the healthcare worker placing fixating the label onto the tube. That's another word that you all are here. Fixating the label on the tube. They're identifying it and again verifying with the patient that the information is correct. And all that is to be done right there in front of the patient. All right, place the specimen in a leak-proof plastic biohazard bag. Transport bag may have a punch pouch on the outside for the laboratory request. When possible, maintain tubes in vertical position to promote complete clot formation, reducing risk of hemolysis. Handle blood specimen gently. Yeah, just because just like how you want to take your time when you invert them, you don't want to shake them because you don't want to rupture the blood cells. You don't want to overmix the additives. Same thing applies when you're taking them to the lab. You don't want to have the bag bouncing all around. You definitely don't want to run the risk of dropping it on the ground because you can still run into these issues. And there's some of the different specimen transportation bags. You see that they were all of different shades and colors, and all of that will come into play later on. Transport of specimens should occur as soon as possible. Special handling procedures are needed for specific laboratory tests. Cooling to slow metabolic process. Transport at body temperature. Protect from light. See table 12-1 in the textbook. All right, and that part right there, protection from light. That's why bags come in a different color. That's why you have to do like urine samples there at the place. You can't bring, but especially for drug testing. When it comes to drug testing, the urine needs to be at a certain temperature for it to, for the reagent strips to be able to read properly, to get the best results. So you will never see that they ask you to bring urine in for a drug test, and also they want to ensure that it's your urine. All right. Right here are tubes being stored in various ways to ensuring that the quality of the specimen is remained intact. While we don't have any of these pictured, if you look at B, I believe it's B. You notice those are the tube holders that we have in class. And I believe I have stated before, if in case I haven't, those would be the racks that you would place the tubes in upon um, upon collection to ensure that they are upright. Microbiolo Microbiological specimens transport as soon as possible to lab so that the specimen can be transferred to culture media or analyzed. All right. Again, all these things are time sensitive, so you definitely want to make sure that you get them to the lab in the appropriate time. All right. Blood culture is usually collected directly into culture media, minimizes possible contamination and speeds contact with the culture media. Specimen transportation to from remote sites, from ambulatory clinics, home health collections, Follow safe handling guidelines and standard precaution. Use enclosed or lockable container to avoid spills in a car. Right? Use biohazard warning labels on containers with notification procedures to in case of accident. Use cold packs during hot weather or heat source in freezing weather. And this may be, and that'll vary depending on where you work. Right? Um, some specimens will need to be on ice all the time. That wouldn't, regardless of the season. So, and be mindful of that. I tell you all the time, it's going to be different where you go. But it's best to learn what what can be expected, and we don't want to don't want you to get caught up on doing things one way, because there are multiple things. There's multiple ways things can be done, and again, they're going to be done differently. But regardless of them being done differently, you still have to follow the mandated guidelines, and the processes aren't going to vary that much. All right, these are coolers or transport cases. Specimen delivery methods. You have hand delivery, um, the pneumatic tube systems, shock absorbing padding, liners, etc. Tubes separated from one another to prevent spillage or breakage, transported via automated carrier. All right. Tubes separated from one another. Again, that would be like the racks that you see in the classroom. Some places will have like special cases for you to put your tubes in. I'm actually working on to see if I can get some of the different cases that tubes can be transported in. Finger crossed on that we can get that we can make that happen. Um, the automated carriers. This can be you in your car, or like a mail carrier. And of course, hand delivery will be you walking it down to the lab yourself. Right? You see here another healthcare worker um, placing collection tubes in a carrier to be transported. Oh, that's the pneumatic tube system that they're using right there. And this is the pneumatic tube system is similar to the the tubing that they use at a bank. Like if you don't go to the ATM machine and you go to like the window or one of the other lanes before the ATM, you'll get a little tube and you have to put your ID and stuff in. Yeah, they use like vacuums to like suck the tube into the building. It's kind of cool if you've never seen it. You guys are young and hip and stuff like that, so y'all just use ATMs. But ATMs aren't always a thing, so we use that tubing system. Um, Transportation by drone. And we live in, as days go by, and we are living in a digital age, but technology is taking over. Um, Drones, they're the thing. You know, um, Drones being evaluated for delivery of blood samples, body fluids, blood blood products. Strict regulations from federal agencies, applications in remote, rural, or improvised locations during natural disasters or in active war locations. Um, Drones are considered are classified just like planes are, and so they can only fly within certain ranges, um, at certain heights. Like the flying altitude is like 32,000 feet. Like that's the cruising altitude. Like once you reach like 32,000 feet, like that's when typically, if you've ever flown or if you haven't flown, once you reach 32,000 feet, that's what the pilot will identify as the cruising altitude. That's when they'll turn off the fasten seatbelt sign and you'll be free to move about the cabin. But drones can't fly above a certain level if an airport is near, because that raises a red flag to the air traffic control towers. They will immediately think that it is a, a terrorist threat, and they will shoot your drone down and destroy it. And drones are fairly expensive, so yeah, that would suck. If you're going to fly in the area near the airport, you have to get clearance. You have to make sure that there are no planes coming in or going out before you can be cleared. And you have to have a license to fly drones. You have to go to school for it. You have to take like 3 tests to be certified to fly drones. But yeah, again, with this day and age that we're living in, um, flying drones, having drones replace like the pneumatic tubing system, you or using mail carriers is is the next wave. It's something that you guys have to look forward to. You can look forward to. All right. Processing a specimen on arrival at the clinical laboratory. Processing steps. Pre-centrifugation. After the specimen is collected, but before centrifugation. Centrifugation while specimen is in centrifuge. Post centrifugation. After centrifugation of specimen, but before removal of the aliquot of an aliquot or specimen or plasma for testing. Um, and I can show you guys what that process looks like in the lab. We'll get some blood. We'll go over to the lab. We'll spin it down, and then I'll show you all the process of how you will go about removing the serum or plasma from the tube. CLSI recommends recommends guidelines for handling and processing. Some do not require centrifugation, hematology, coagulation, need gentle mixing using mixing tray. I don't know if you guys have seen this in like any movies. Um, it's actually kind of rare now, but a mixing tray, it's it's just a tray, and you will set the tubes on, and it will just gently like rock back and forth, kind of in a seesaw type motion, gently inverting the tubes, mixing the additives, and things of that nature. Pre-centrifugation, specimen handling, processing after collection and prior to centrifugation. For specimens that do not require centrifugation, rule of thumb is serum or plasma should be removed from cells as soon as possible and not exceed 2 hours from time of collection. Plasma specimens, centrifugation immediately. Specimens without anticoagulant additives must clot before centrifugation. Right. So what that means that if you draw bloods in a red top tube, which we know has no additives, you must allow it to sit and clot before you place it in the centrifuge. Clotting time can be delayed by patient's anticoagulation medication. Chilling the specimen will also delay the clotting, unless it's chilled like at a certain temperature. Because after a like if you draw blood in a purple top tube, you have to store it, and it's stored at like maybe somewhere around like 30 degrees. The serum will automatically begin to separate from the red blood cells. That's only with EDTA, to my knowledge. Um, Clotting may be accelerated by activators such as glass or silica particles, thrombin, snake venom, or thrombin. And was all that's simply saying is that simply mixing the blood with snake venom or thrombin will cause it to clot almost immediately. Keep sensitive analytes wrapped in aluminum foil or placed in amber specimen container. If you guys want to pause this and go back and look at figure 12.4 or look at figure 12.5, you see the amber colored bags in 12.4, and in 12.5 you see the tube wrapped in aluminum foil. Centrifugation. Serum samples should clot before centrifugation. Complete clotting takes about 30 to 60 minutes. Leave tube caps on during centrifugation. Balance the centrifuge. Do not open the top of the centrifuge until it has stopped completely. Right. Use temperature controlled centrifuge. Do not centrifuge specimens more than once. Follow manufacturer's directions for use of gel and non-gel devices. Right. When placing tubes in the centrifuge, you have to make sure that the centrifuge is balanced, or otherwise it will not spin the tubes down. If that centrifuge is not balanced, it will not work. It's going to rattle all over the place, make a lot of noise, and you will tear it up. And centrifuges cost on average about $2,000 to just have fixed. $2,000. Right? Um, so be mindful of that when working with a centrifuge. Post-centrifugation, remember to separate serum or plasma from cells as soon as possible. Refrigerate or freeze specimen accordingly. Specimens may be delivered into numerous aliquots. Consider storage temperatures depending on which tests are ordered. Do not repeatedly freeze, thaw, refreeze specimens. Serum plasma may be left in contact with gel barrier, separator device, plunger. Follow manufacturer's recommendation. Inspect tubes before centrifugation. You just simply want to make sure that it's not expired, make sure there's no cracks and things of that nature, because if a tube breaks inside the centrifuge, that will throw the centrifuge off and is going to award for repairs. I just recently shared with you all about how much that will cost on average to get it clean or fixed. Store tubes in the upright position with secure closure. Excessive anegation may cause hemolysis. Agitation may cause hemolysis. I apologize for that. Specimens may appear lipemic. Lipemic is when a specimen appears like pinkish in color, almost like a strawberry milkshake. So here you see some of the different specimens look like. See, a good specimen, one that see A, it's like extremely cloudy. There was no balance in the centrifuge. B, you tell like maybe prior to the sitting time, hemolysis has occurred, so the red blood cells have been ruptured. C looks like a good one, and D is it hasn't been mixed properly. All right. These are commercially available blood filters for separating fiber and cellular materials from plasma or serum. I don't know how those work. I've never worked with those. Using the right centrifuge, consider the following factors: types of tubes, rotor, spin time, and speed and capacity. All right. You guys have seen that there are different shapes and sizes of tubes, so you want to make sure that your centrifuge is uh, will allow you to use those tubes. And every tube can't be used in every centrifuge. Temperature control, noise level, proximity to other instruments, maintenance and training for centrifuge operators. And that's when I just spoke about how you make sure that it's balanced, making sure that it's calibrated correctly, which we spoke about in earlier chapters. All these things are vital to being successful in a lab. Shipping biohazard specimens, primary source for regulation governing specimen and biological shipments in the United States is the Department of Transportation, DOT. DOT collaborated with WHO and an UN committee of experts. I said UN, I mean the UN committee of experts and CDC to establish these guidelines. Infectious substances known or reasonably expected to contain a pathogen. A pathogen, as spoke about in previous chapters, bacteria, viruses, or rickettsia, parasites, fungi, other agents such as proteinaceous infectious particles that cause disease in humans or animals. There are two categories of infectious substances. Category A, exposure capable of permanent disability or life-threatening. Category B, exposure not usually life-threatening or capable of permanent disability. Here is just a diagram of what it looks like to safely transport a specimen. Train all employees involved in transport. Materials must meet strength and absorbency requirements. Identify, classify, pack, mark, label, and document according to procedures. Make advance arrangements with specimen carriers. Receive confirmation of delivery. Notify all carriers of all shipping details. Follow up immediately if a problem is reported. Report laboratory results, with written reports. Confirm, dated, accompanied by permanent reports available in laboratory and patient's medical record. Must contain ID of patient, location, and physician. Date and time of specimen collection. Description, source of sample, and label precautions. For paper copies, compactness and ease of shipment mailing. Consistency in format. Clear understandability of instructions or orders. Logical location in patient's medical record for reference of laboratory reports. Sequential order of multiple results on a single specimen. Listing of reference ranges or normal and abnormal critical values. Assurance of accuracy of request transcription. Administrative and record keeping value. Use has declined because of easier, more reliable computer access and concerns of privacy. And here we're talking about verbal reports. They're not used as much. All right, we talked about this in a previous chapter when we were talking about communication. I believe it was communication and another chapter. Because again, we want to make sure that all the information is being transported uh, and logged correctly, and writing it, we run the risk of having it get smeared or it's forgetting something. So we just go ahead and type it in the computer, and that way when the specimen arrives at the lab, all the information is there. Same thing, that's why we don't use verbal reports anymore, because you don't want to run the risk of getting sidetracked or saying the wrong thing. Useful to report stat results, and critical values, but more prone to error. Right? Again, stat again meaning it's an emergency. So if you are not in control of yourself and your emotions, in the event that we need something stat, because you could be emotional, the information isn't going to be conveyed as it should be. Documentation should include patient's name, ID number, person receiving report, date, time, information given, person issuing the report. This is typical what the reporting results to the lab verbally. This is everything that you will need, and this is everything that will show up actually on any lab report. You make sure that you have the patient's name, physician's name, the person requesting the information, date of test results. Any information given, this will be if they were supposed to fast and they say they didn't, um, date and time of inquiry, what times you take it, reported by, That'll be your initials and the patient's ID. Reporting laboratory results, computerized reports. Rapid online report system, more reliable than verbal reports. Hospitals may have computers located in each patient's unit. Results immediately displayed in each patient's unit. And printers can be attached to terminals to generate temporary hard copy reports. Steps must be taken to ensure privacy and confidentiality. Can easily provide daily laboratory reports and cumulative reports. Right? That's chapter 12.